small step for man, one giant leap So, I guess you want to do it again. Okay.
16th of July 1969, 1:30 p.m. UTC, Kennedy Space Center. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins launched into space in a Saturn V rocket to land a man on the moon. This mission was Apollo 11. The Saturn V they travelled upon held the stages of the moon landing craft that would bear famous names that the public would come to know only too well. The Command Service Module Columbia, the Lunar Module Eagle, and when on the surface, Tranquility Base. They flew through space for 3 days, and on the 20th of July 1969, the Lunar Module Eagle, piloted by Buzz Aldrin and also carrying Neil Armstrong, separated from the Command Service Module Columbia, which was crewed by Michael Collins, and headed for the lunar landing site, Mare Tranquillitatis. At 20:17 p.m. UTC, the Lunar Module Eagle touched down upon the moon's surface, and Armstrong spoke the now famous words, "Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed," and the rest became history. The United States had effectively ended the space race, and man had landed on the moon. Or had he? Or had he indeed? Hello everybody, welcome. This is the Mystery Machine, and we're chatting about the moon landing hoax. I'm Dave Dorias Lives, and I've also got my wonderful, wonderful guest. Would you like to introduce yourself, Damian?
Yeah, brief history of mystery. Damian, evening all.
Steve. That means it's your turn to talk, Stephen.
No, I'm just going to sit here and look longingly into the camera. He can't hear us, can he?
That's fine. Well, we've got Steve, and of course we've got the wonderful, wonderful Jay. How are you doing, brother?
Here we go.
I'm good, man. I'm good. Oh, he's back. Hello, Steve.
We got him back. That's absolutely wonderful.
Oh, mate.
That's
yeah,
absolutely...
Steve Stranger Times. How we doing, everybody?
Okay, cool. So we should probably jump straight in. Of course, this one, pretty famous one where conspiracy theories go, guys. The starting block or the leaping point for many new tinfoil hat brigade kind of devotees and inductees has got to be this one. I'd say it's a biggie, wouldn't you?
Yeah, man. This is my first conspiracy theory. This is the one that got me hooked. Oh, that.
So, in a way, this holds a special place for you, then, Jay. Yeah.
Yeah, this was me watching Channel 4 late at night and watched some like panel show, and they were all talking, and then me telling my parents the next day, we faked the moon landings, were all faked. I sounded like a nutter for about 5 years of my life. But
then you saw the light.
Well, you're not going to convince me that it's not possible it was fake. But I do have I don't really believe it was faked. But I do believe it's possible.
Absolutely, yeah. In space, everything is possible, allegedly. Yeah. With some of the dodgy things I've seen. Okay, so what we're running at is, you saw the intro. We all know what's allegedly happened on the 16th of July 1969. So we've got a bit of a list to be running at, and we've got some notable mentions that some of the guys have thrown up towards the end there, which we'll also cover. So we'll scroll them across the bottom, and we'll chat about them and see what you guys think. And we've just lost Steve, but I'm sure he'll come back to us as and when he can. So, of course, one of the big ones, one of the main ones is that, isn't it? The moon landings were filmed in a TV studio. All right, so nice and conveniently, they were made in a TV studio. Now, so what is the likelihood of that? Okay, so given the technology, what was coming out at the time, and any particular reason why they would want to do that, what do you think, Jay?
I think you'd want to control the environment, and you'd also want to make sure nobody saw what you were doing if you were hoaxing this. So, I mean, the TV studio definitely gives you a controlled environment, but there's nothing that I see in the actual video that makes you think. I mean, you hear a lot of these stories about the lighting and the crazy different angles of the lighting and the shadows and things, but that's assuming that there was only one light source, and there wasn't. There was at least two. So no, if you were hoaxing it, yeah, that's what you'd want to do, wouldn't you? You'd want to be in this TV studio.
Okay, Damian, what are your thoughts on that? The good old-fashioned one, it was made in a TV studio?
Well, I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. I think it could have been. I mean, Red Hot Chili Peppers lyric, isn't it? Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. I don't know. It's quite an interesting line. Grew up listening to the Chili Peppers, I guess, so it kind of made me think back then and kind of brought me into the moon conspiracy. Yeah, if you're going to do it, you want to do it in a TV studio, wouldn't you? Where you can control the lighting in a closed environment. You're not going to try and do it outside. I agree with that.
Where a rabbit could go bouncing by or something. Have you seen the James Bond movie? So Ian Fleming definitely believed it was faked and filmed in a studio, because I can't think which film it was. It wasn't Moonraker, but it was one of the early ones. He's chasing a couple of bad guys, and then he just randomly runs across a moon set for no reason. It's not relevant to the film at all. But he just runs across a moon set and carries on chasing the bad guy.
I'm trying to think which one it is. I do vaguely remember the scene, but yeah.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do too.
Okay.
Sorry, was
Steve,
that
what
one?
do you think, brother?
I missed most of the intro and everything because my internet was playing up, so I didn't get to see any of that. So I do apologise. Are we talking about the James Bond film?
Yeah.
Well, what your opinions are on the main thing there? The moon landings were filmed in the TV studio.
Like Jamie said earlier, it's possible it could have been faked. I don't think it was. I'm 95% sure that it wasn't, and that we did go. But there is a lot of stuff out on the internet that has been out for a long time. With the footage of the astronaut falling over, and then sort of being pulled back up as though he was wearing a harness. Do you know what I mean? It's a tricky one for the for the conspiracists, but yeah, I'm 95% sure that we did go. Okay,
well, I'll raise up a couple of points, and we'll batter it about there. And this, obviously, there's different ways of capturing, obviously, moving images, and one of them is obviously film, which is actual strips of photographic material onto which a series of images are exposed. And then, of course, you got video, which is, an electronic method of recording onto various mediums, such as, in them days, it would have been moving magnetic tape. Yeah. With video, you can also broadcast it to a television receiver. We know that. I know we're in the age of digital TV now. But back in, obviously, the era of the Apollo moon landings, that wasn't the case. And a standard motion picture film back then recorded at 24 frames per second. And broadcast TV was typically 25 to 30 frames a second, depending upon which part of the world you're in. So if we go along with that idea that the moon landings were taped in a TV studio, that would mean that it would be at 30 frames per second max, which was the television standard. But we know, or allegedly we know, that from the video from the first moon landing, it was recorded at 10 frames per second in what was called slow scan television with a special camera. So that being the case, is it likely that it was filmed in the TV studio, given that it was the frame rate was completely different, the technology used to create it? We know that it was filmed at 10 frames a second. It's been analysed to be 10 frames a second. So what are the likelihood that it's filmed in a TV studio, knowing that?
I'm not sure that makes a great deal of difference, because surely you would, if you're faking this, you're going to use, just because it's on a TV studio, you wouldn't use TV studio technology or cameras. You would use the camera that you would have planned to take to the moon. So surely you would think ahead, wouldn't you? You would use a camera that suits the technology that you are expecting to be using.
Yeah, I get that. It would make sense.
But then you've gone pretty far with the planning of the actual mission to the moon, but perhaps it just fell through at the last minute. Getting to there by the end of the decade and happening to do it in July 1969 to make good on the promise. There isn't much time left, is there? So time was definitely running out.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You would potentially just use the technology you fully intended to send to the moon, but maybe after the Grissom accident and the fire, they decided, nah, okay, guys, we can't do this. Let's just crack on with it. But we're 95% of the way there. We just so yeah. I don't think the film rate is a deal breaker for me. It would be, I would use the technology I'd planned to use. I hope very clever people would be thinking about these things. To be honest,
what was the reason for the lower frame rate in the cameras that where the film was taken?
Transmission, the being able
transmission,
to
the data.
Yeah, because it wasn't terrestrial transmission rates and broadcast frequencies. Because you would transmit video on a different frequency than you would on audio on all their terrestrial TV.
Yeah, there's not much bandwidth, is there, on transmitting on analog? So I suppose you've got to limit the frame rate to limit the size of the amount of data that you're sending back. Yeah. Okay,
cool. The other one is, of course, they used a special camera in the studio and slowed down the footage. So they slowed down the footage to make it look real. I can see you chomping at the bit for this one, Jamie. Go on.
Well, to be honest, it's rubbish. But when you do see these videos on YouTube where they do speed up that 1.5 or 2 times, they do look like they're just skipping around and kicking the dirt up. It does look pretty. I can see why people are fooled by it. But at the same time, I mean, it's not something it's not something I believe, and I completely understand that the lower gravity and the way people move it. And again, remember, these suits are incredibly heavy. Even in the lower gravity, they're still incredibly heavy. So that moving around in them was very, very difficult. But you see these videos of them, like say, bouncing around, kicking up the dirt, and it does kind of look convincing.
It does, yeah.
Okay, yeah, Steve, what are your thoughts on that? They slowed down the footage to make it look real, nice and conveniently. They slowed it down to make it look cool.
Again, just like Jamie says, it does look as though they're sort of zipping around and at normal speed, but there's just something about it that doesn't look right. But then when you put it back to the normal speed, it sort of does make sense to how we would think it would be on the moon. But again, if you speed it up, it does make you think, well, hold on a second. Do you know what I mean? It's a tricky one. It is.
Damo.
Yeah, I mean, slowing down the footage to make it look real. I do agree with Jamie when the footage is sped up of them walking around on the surface. It does appear as though it does seem as though they're like skipping perhaps in normal gravity. But I suppose the real problem is we've got no real comparison to draw. We don't know what 1/6 gravity. We don't know how that affects your mechanical movement on the surface of a smaller planet with a lot less gravity. That was kind of the first experiment of that. So there's no basis there to compare it to, really. So I think it's difficult to really call it just on that, because you can't really say what you're looking at definitively.
I think that's an important point, isn't it? That we will look at some of these things and go, well, that doesn't look right. And he goes, well, yeah, but it looks right for space. It doesn't look right for a human on Earth, but for space, it's normal. We agree with that. But you know what we can do, though, is we can go back, can't we, and examine the original tapes that were recorded from Apollo 11. Well, we would have been able to if NASA hadn't.
Yeah, they haven't got them anymore, have they?
No.
So we can't go back to the moon.
Not for American government agencies to lose footage or
history
evidence.
To be fair, though, it does have to be noted that even the BBC scrubbed lots of TV series so they could reuse the tapes at a later date.
Yeah.
And that's why you get big chunks of certain TV shows that are like really hold historical significance to the viewers no longer exist unless they're in private collectors, because they've been scrubbed, so they could reuse the tape again. So that kind of thing does go on.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
this
you
is
wouldn't like
taken
to think it does. You wouldn't like to think it
No.
does at NASA, though, do you? You know.
That was
This
probably a
isn't taping over
pre-millennium
Terry
problem.
and June. This is taping over the Apollo 11 mission, so I think it's a bit different.
What would you rather keep, everybody? Terry and June on the Apollo 11 moon landings. I know what I'd rather keep.
June.
Terry and
I love
June.
Terry and June. That's a great show.
And then they say,
Well,
say about this one, they say because like they look like they're moving in low gravity environment, yeah. Now slowing down film requires more frames than usual, and this you start off with a camera capable of capturing more frames in a second than a normal one, and it's called overcranking. So when this is played back at the normal frame rate, the footage plays back for longer. And if you can't overcrank the camera, but you record at a normal frame rate, you can instead artificially slow down the footage. But you need a way to store the frames and generate new extra frames to slow it down, to insert them in between. And at the time when the moon landings were broadcast, magnetic disc recorders that were capable of storing slow motion footage could only capture 30 seconds in total, which would give them 90 seconds of slow motion video. And the entire footage of the Apollo 11 was 143 minutes in slow motion. So you'd need to record and store 47 minutes of live action, which simply isn't possible on a 90-second video cassette if you're overcranking.
okay, interesting.
This is going to sound, I'm going to sound stupid now, but if they recorded it at 20 frames a second and then played it at 10 frames a second, like you said a second ago, wouldn't that make it look slower, or would that make it look faster?
You'd skip every other frame.
It'd make it look faster.
It would go faster, wouldn't it? So you need to go the other way.
Speed up, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the thing. The technology to slow it down meant you would need more cassette to be able to do it, and they simply didn't have that technology back then.
If you're telling the biggest lie that's ever been told, and you were planning ahead, would you again prepare for that? Would you again? Remembering that this basically had an unlimited budget.
But you see, the way that I look at it is, you wouldn't need to worry about slowing anything down, or you wouldn't need to worry about overcranking or using any of that technology by using SSTV if you're just going to film it in a TV studio anyway. You wouldn't need to go to all them problems. You would just use TV format. Because as you put before, which I agree with, why would you need to bother? Because it's only people later on that are going to analyze the footage to see if it's fake, if they indeed think it's fake, which leads us to where we are now, which is having this discussion in the first place, you know.
Would they have thought about it as well, about 50, 60, 70 years down the line, whether or not
the other thing is, people thought the moon landings were faked almost immediately. I mean, when was Capricorn 1 made? The mid-70s, late 70s?
And that is 76, 77 or something.
Great film.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's about obviously going to Mars, but the whole plot of that film is, very heavily suggesting the moon landings are fake. That was made within 7 or 8 years. This was a conspiracy theory that began almost immediately.
Yeah.
Do you think it's perhaps because we are essentially 4.5 billion years of evolving stardust that we're drawn back to the stars?
Oh, very deep. I like that.
I need to go get a beer before we discuss that.
No, it was just a point you made me think of. Sorry, it was a bit off topic, but
no, it was very good. I like it a lot.
I explained to my kids that we're all made out of stardust, and they just sat there and looked at me like I was crazy. Because no, you are. You're amazing. You're made out of stardust. Dad, shut up.
Yeah, Dad, just don't. Okay, another good one, and let's rock it. The flag is blowing in the wind or being blown by a fan from the studio. This is a good one, this. I knew you'd like this one, Jamie.
Stupid. This is stupid.
The flag is blowing in the wind or blown by a fan from the studio. Steve, you go first so he can count. Because he'll blast this one to bits. So go on, Steve.
It is, though. It's waving about all over the place, isn't it? There's no denying it. That photo proves everything. No. They say that when he, slammed it into the ground on the lunar surface, that it was a vibration into the flag and everything like that. Believe it or not, that's it, isn't it? And there we go.
Damo. What do you think, Damian?
About the flag blowing in the wind? Well, no, I don't think there was any wind on the surface of the moon.
You're wrong there. There is.
What's the reach of the
There is
solar
wind on
wind?
the moon.
Yeah,
Not
okay.
enough to blow the flag like that, though, surely.
Oh God, no.
There you go.
Not anything like it. But,
Come on, Jamie.
So I tell you
Let
what,
him loose. Let
it's
him loose. Come on,
because
Jamie, go.
there's a pole across the bloody top. That's why it's flapping about. There's a pole at the top going from side to picking side. And there's no gravity, there's no wind, there's no thing. So it's flapping and making it look like it's flapping. It's not flapping. It's the pole across the top. It's very simple. It's not complicated. But like weirdly, the moon actually does have a very, very light atmosphere, and you even get clouds on the moon. So there is insanely tiny amounts of sort of wind, but it's not air, it's not oxygen, it's just basically dust that takes ages to float back down. But yeah, it's a pole across the top.
Is it trapped like singular gas particles in an atmosphere that occasionally bump into each other? That's about the extent of it.
That's about it, yeah.
And you can clearly see the bar across the top in that picture there. Anyway, there's the bar. What's holding it out, holding it in position.
Stupid conspiracy theories annoy me. So
let's go with. Go on, sorry, brother.
No, it's so easy to understand this one. Why is it still even mentioned? It's easy.
Because people need something to hang on to, don't they? To discredit it all and prove that it was fake.
Some people
That's
are
why,
stupid.
isn't it?
I think also people are fed up with their governments lying to them, and in particular the American government lying, and also being caught out multiple times through history lying. It's hard to believe them when it is a true story, perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is like as you said, when it was stuck in the ground, it would have been disturbed, obviously, and kept its sort of shape. But it does appear to wave back and forth. And as we said, it's because obviously when the astronauts were putting it in, and they rotated it back and forth to better dig it into the lunar soil, and that made the flag ripple. And also the vibration of the pole when acted upon, we know that, as Jamie said as well, caused the flag to ripple. And the only time that it actually appears to move is when it is being placed.
Yeah,
if you actually watch the footage, the only time that it looks like it's moving is when it's being placed. And any other like sort of movement is probably down to image distortion, and they call it video interlacing, don't they? Because of the we've discussed the scan rate, and but you any kind of person who does compute games or does any kind of videography, you'll understand what interlacing is. And the wrinkles in the flag are there because it had been stored for 4 days on the way to the moon.
Yeah,
it had been stored in a container for 4 days on the way to the moon.
They don't think it's there anymore now.
It's probably before that picture.
Sorry. Well, when it was launched, the flag was knocked over. Apparently, you do see it being knocked over. But they're saying because there's no. Go on, sorry, Steve.
I was just going to say in that photo there, the astronaut stood back quite far from the flag. It's been placed there, and you wouldn't really expect it to be moving that much if you look. Still with him, maybe 5-10 seconds for him to get back to where he is. Do you know what I mean? And the flag to be moving like that still.
It's not moving though, is it? That's a still image.
Yeah, but when you would get movement for longer though, because
see all the different shadows in it that it is.
One of the things is there's no air density.
Yeah.
There's less literally pushing against it. The air density we've got above us is equivalent to about 30 foot of water. We don't feel it because we're used to it, and that is constantly pushing down and holding things. So I mean, but there's none. So when it does get a movement, it does go for longer than we would consider normal, because there's literally nothing pushing against it. So the energy doesn't dissipate as quickly. So it does sort of move for longer, which again looks weird, but it's normal.
Yeah. Very little or no atmosphere, lack of air resistance. Yeah. And
what you're doing is looking at a still image and assuming it's moving because there's lumps and bulges in it. When in actual fact, if you crumple up a crisp packet and then let it go, it'll settle into a shape, but it will remain crumpled. if there isn't any external or outside force to put it back into shape. So to me, that just looks like a still image where it's looking like it's billowing, but it doesn't suggest that it's billowing. You can stand and raise one leg up and one arm up as if you're running, and somebody take a photograph, but you're not running at all. You're not moving. You just look like you are. So to me, that doesn't mean it's blowing, even though it gives the impression that it's blowing there. Just personally, anyway.
Yeah. It's like it's a sixth gravity, isn't it, of the Earth, and it probably just hasn't got enough of a force on the flag to undo the crumples, what it is, from it being stored on the way to the moon.
Number 4, you're gonna love this one. We're all gonna love this one. Bosh. The lighting is from a spotlight because the shadows look strange.
There are some odd shadows.
Okay, so we need to discuss convergence then, don't we, at some stage? Who wants to take this then first? Who wants to go first? Who's ready for this?
Let Jamie do it.
Let Jamie do everything.
Right. The one thing that is that a lot of these conspiracy theories are assuming the only light source is the sun. Is the big thing. So it says right, there's one light source. It's the sun. These shadows don't make sense. The problem is there is a second light source, and it's actually the moon itself.
Yeah.
You know, in a full moon, you look up. It's incredible. It is bright. It's a very reflective surface. There's quite a high content of metal in the dust and things like this. It's very reflective. As soon as you then, when they did computer generation and computer models, as soon as they included the moon as a light source, all the shadows seem to make sense. And particularly like the astronaut coming down from the module. And he says he should be in shadow. It should be dark. We shouldn't be able to see him. That's true until you remember that the moon is a light source as well, and then it all sort of makes sense.
Yeah,
that's it basically. It's
Damian.
boring, but that's.
Yeah, I agree. The lunar surface obviously is reflective. It does reflect some of the sun's light. I think it's not that reflective though. I think it's only in the tune of about 15% or so, something like that. 15. What the third and fourth light sources, well, and even fifth light sources, was Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and the different surfaces of the lunar lander itself and their different reflective qualities. So the spacesuits that the astronauts were wearing, I think it was Teflon. It's got a very high reflective, more like about 85%. So actually, ironically, Buzz Aldrin should have been in shadow, except for Neil Armstrong acting as a second light source, casting a load of light from the sun into that famous picture.
There you go.
NVIDIA did a really good model. They built a really complex computer model to model the lunar landings and recreate that exact image, basically.
Yeah,
and trying to figure out how the light would have had to have reflected off of different surfaces that were there in order, and they got it to look very, very similar from their model to the original picture. And I was just that
pretty bang on, wasn't it?
It was great.
Steve, what do you reckon, buddy?
Excuse me. Excuse me. Just as the other two lads said, all you got to do is go outside on a full moon night and see how much light's coming off the moon and lighting up the Earth. So that's it. It's the moon's very reflective. So
okay, well, I obviously preposterously large write up for this bit, and it's we've done away with it in 2 minutes, so I'm gonna have to indulge myself. But go on, Jamie.
I was just gonna say there that you've got images as well, like some of these where you can see the crosses on this image. And then there's some images that show that there's take a picture of a rock, and it looks like the cross isn't complete. It looks like the cross is behind the rock, and a lot of people have pointed to those images to say, "Well, that's proof. Look, it's fake. They forgot to draw the cross in." It's not. It's what it is that these rocks are so reflective. When they're taking a picture of, it's so reflective. It's actually sort of like blurring out that little bit of the cross.
Yeah, it's burning it out. Yeah,
it's burning it out. Yeah. So again, these things have been bounced around as proof, like the flag, have been bounced around as proof for years and years. But really, they're not proof of anything. They're very explainable by anybody that understands the sort of photography that they were doing. But also, I think that if this was faked, it is also the sort of thing that they've anticipated.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
You would have thought so.
there you go. Okay, so the moon, obviously massively reflective, as we know, because the dust on the moon is called regolith.
That's the word.
Regolith. And the physical properties of it are primarily the result of mechanical disintegration of basaltic and anorthositic rock caused by continual meteoric impacts and bombardment. So lunar soil is mainly derived from silica, 45%, alumina, 15%, lime, 12%, iron oxide, which is 14% roughly. And these are like rounded off figures for the mare regions of the lowlands type area. And due to its composition, lunar dust has massively reflective properties, as we've just said. During the photographs taken on the lunar surface of Armstrong and Aldrin, there were multiple reflective surfaces, which we just covered, each in themselves providing a light source to cause opposition surge, which is to reflect light onto other areas that would otherwise been expected to have been in shadow, such as the panels on the LEM. Again, you can see convergence there, photographic convergence of shadows. The spacesuits on the astronauts, what they wore themselves, because Armstrong's own suit was illuminating Aldrin's as he stepped off the lunar module, which I believe you said, Damian, didn't you?
Yeah.
The rocks and boulders, which have mostly the same composition as the soil, they saw the same reflective qualities as the regolith on the moon, and all causing a phenomenon known as opposition surge. And of course, you got the sunlight was also reflecting off the aluminized captain foil on the lunar lander and the white spacesuits, as well as off the Earth itself as earthshine. So multiple different areas. And then you've got what's called photographic or shadow convergence. And this is on Earth now. None of these are faked. You can see a single light source behind that tree there, of course, which is the sun, but you can see different lines going off in different directions and at different angles due to convergence. If you change perspective, the lines of convergence would change. Become parallel, because people expect the lines to be parallel on the photographs and all point in the same direction, and because they don't, people scream fake. And you did raise a good point there, Jamie, so thanks for that about the actual crosses on the Hasselblad cameras being burnt out. It's that was a good one. Yeah, absolutely. This is gonna, everybody's gonna like this one now. It's time guys, for the Van Allen belts, I'm afraid. The good old Van Allen belts.
This is what first convinced me that they were faked. It was,
well, then
if
please
the
feel free
radiation-
to take
I'd
it.
agree with that. It was one of the things that made me think that there was some credence, to the conspiracy.
And it's one of the
Go,
major
Jay, go.
factors just stopping us from going back as well. There's recently an engineer was released a video for the Orion project, the project that's hopefully going to take us back to the moon. And he actually calls the Van Allen belts deadly. So protecting our astronauts through the deadly Van Allen belts is one of our main primary, sources of interest or source of protection. The Van Allen belts, though, the radiation. You actually try to find out how much radiation is in the Van Allen belts. It's not particularly easy.
Well, they're fluctuating fields, aren't they?
Yeah, they're basically caused by the magnetic fields of the Earth and places where the radiation literally just gets trapped. That's coming from the sun. But it is true to say that if there had been a decent solar flare or any sort of large scale solar activity, the astronauts wouldn't have survived.
No, correct.
Yeah, definitely.
The Van Allen belts can be deadly, and they are actually huge. But the speed and the angle that the astronauts went through the Van Allen belts was very specifically calculated to make sure that they were, I think they were only in the Van Allen belts for about 8 minutes, or something like that. The actual trajectory of the flight was specifically planned to stay out of them for as long as possible. And there is an element to say as well that the NASA weren't actually 100% certain how bad they'd be.
Yeah, I remember reading that myself. Yeah, that they were they was unsure. So they were guinea pigs in a way for the Van Allen belts.
Yeah,
the Van Allen belts had only been discovered in the late 50s. They'd only been discovered a few years earlier.
Yeah, 58,
when we
I think.
started putting stuff in space. You know, it was they weren't well understood at all.
Strangely enough, with science, it was James Van Allen. He got his name on the radiation zones, but they fluctuate, don't they? And they can they probably, I don't think NASA really knew anything about them, and probably they were guinea pigs, the astronauts. And to be honest, it meant more to achieve getting to the moon, as JFK had promised, than those astronauts' lives probably meant. I know that's harsh, but that is probably the reality of it.
Well, they wanted to beat Russia as well, didn't they? So that's the main part of it.
I mean, I don't think you're being harsh. I think that's a very astute observation. That's it. I mean, you see what happened to Shafi, Grissom, and was it White? You know, they died in the Apollo 1 on the launch pad due to explosion of gases, some wiring heating up, and then causing the pure oxygen to ignite inside the capsule, I believe. Not a nice way to go, but it didn't stop. Yeah. It didn't stop the project in any way, which won't come as a massive shock to anybody here, anybody listening. Okay.
I honestly think they were desperate, to beat the Russians. And I don't think they genuinely cared. And when the astronauts sort of said, "Well, if we die, who will look after our family? Can we get insured? Can we get some sort of insurance?" The American government said, "No, we're not. We just pay you a wage. You're not, death in service." That's about all they were getting. So their way of getting around it was the astronauts signed a bunch of postcards, literally just saying like, "Love you, Neil Armstrong." And then if they died during the mission, the families would sell those postcards, and that's how they would basically get by. That is sick that the American government weren't even willing to insure them. And that's how little they actually probably believed that there was going to be successful. Which is one of the reasons why I think they might have faked it.
Just got images from Deep Impact, that film. Is it? Not Deep Impact, Armageddon, the one with Bruce Willis.
Yeah, Armageddon, yeah.
No taxes ever again.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to get something.
Yeah.
Couple of useless. Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
No, absolutely not, no. So a couple of facts that we can either bounce about or just move quickly on from, but I'll throw them out there and see what people think. Let the cat out of the bag and see who chases it around the garden, kind of thing. And it's radiation sickness, put my teeth back in, occurs when you've been exposed to around 200 to 1,000 rads of radiation within a few hours. Okay. And the Apollo 11 crew were within the belts for less than 2 hours during their journey to the moon, and so would have only been exposed to an estimated 18 rads, which is well within the safe limit. And NASA made sure that the spacecraft was well insulated, so actually the average dose of radiation over the 12-day mission was just 0.18 rads, similar to a chest x-ray. And the highest dose for any of the Apollo missions was 0.38 rads, which is the same as having 2 CT scans of the head.
No, it's not.
Where are you getting those facts from, though?
Oh, I'm getting it from the Ladybird book of Van Allen belts.
You're getting it from NASA. They're telling you exactly what radiation thing there was.
Yeah, that's where all the information's coming from, isn't it? Do
you know what the radiation protection of the module was?
Oh, tell us. That's why
there wasn't any. There wasn't any at all. There's an engineer. It was one of the anniversaries, and he was talking about the engineer of one of the Apollo missions, and he was saying, this vehicle was incredibly fragile. It's amazing it did what it did. You could take a screwdriver and punch a hole in the side of it if you wanted to. And he was sort of like, he was trying to show off how it was a miracle this thing survived. It was a miracle it survived because it had to be incredibly lightweight because the rockets were crap. So they had to save every ounce. On Apollo, oh God, I'm gonna have to remember this. Was it 14? Where Anderson took the golf balls. Yeah. He was told he was only allowed to take 3. He was told he was allowed to take 3 golf balls. He snuck 4 on, and they were furious, because that is a few extra grams that he wasn't supposed to take because they measure everything. These vehicles were incredibly fragile, and when you look at radiation protection, there is none.
We'll go
So-
into the thrusters of the and the like I say, the thrust and the weight and the power of these things in a little bit because of something you brought up the other day and put into the side chat. I haven't forgot what you put in the Facebook messages. Then we'll cover them points. They're good ones.
Yeah.
We'll get to them because there's some proper chunky monkeys in this lot. I mean, you sort of alluded to it a little bit earlier, Jay. So why not go there? Why don't we just go there and taste the indulgent, luscious flavouring of the moon rocks? The moon rocks. People
that are mostly gone missing.
Yes, that has to be said. Yes, which have mostly gone missing. But the moon rocks. Okay, do the moon rocks prove or disprove either way?
They don't prove
Your
anything.
thoughts, boys?
No.
You don't think they prove anything?
Well,
They could have been brought back by anything. Well, to be fair, we've got quite a lot of moon rock on the Earth anyway, because they land in meteorites all the time. But also, they could have been manufactured. We know what the moon was made out of. But also, we could have just sent a rover, picked them up, and come back. They didn't have to be manned. It would have been very, very difficult, and I don't think that's what they did. But it's possible. So I don't. The fact that we can hold a piece of moon rock, and the other thing is, you only know it's moon rock because you're told it is. No one's allowed to experiment on it because it's the most valuable rock ever. If you look at the expense it took to actually bring that rock back, it's literally the most valuable material ever in the history of man. So nobody's doing tests on it.
Well, I was under the impression that some of these had actually been spread to different space agencies around the world, even the Chinese, which, given their obvious love of the West and so on and so forth, why would they feel the need to continue the cover story of the US rather than blow it out of the water by saying, yes, we received these so-called moon rocks and it's all rubbish, they're not moon rocks at all, or they haven't come from the source where they've stated they've come from,
Every country on Earth was sent a small piece of moon rock, and like we said, I think about half of them have now gone missing, and nobody knows where they are. So that just shows how much these countries gave a crap when America turned up and showing off, going, look, here, a piece of moon rock. I was, oh, well done, you went to the moon, thanks very much.
They're just highly desirable items for thieves. It's quite I stole a bit of moon rock. That's quite it's quite cool, isn't it? It's like having a meteorite. Yeah,
I'd have a moon rock. The other thing I was going to say though was that it doesn't prove anything. And the other thing is, I think these countries aren't calling America out because actually most countries are terrified of America, either through military or financial pressure. And also, this is the biggest lie ever told if it's genuine, if it's true. But also, would the rock actually prove anything, or would it just be rock with the right sort of mineral content? It might not actually be a smoking gun. You might not actually be able to prove whether it came from the moon or not.
Unless we go back there.
Well, I will cover that in a second. Steve, what do you think?
Exactly the same. Exactly the same. If they say it's from the moon, it's from the moon. They went to the moon, got some rock. Whether it be from moon rock landing on the Earth and things like that. If it's moon rock, it's moon rock. If that makes sense. I don't think they're gonna manufacture it or go that sort of deep with it, to be honest. And like you said, with China having it as well, if they found out that it wasn't real moon rock, they would have probably said something. But it's moon rock at the end of the day. That's what I believe.
Couple of facts then. Let's go with this. Allegedly, they come back with in total there's 842 pounds or 382 kilograms of moon rocks, which, as you said, Jamie, have been shared and studied by scientists in many countries for decades. And apparently, again, depending upon what sources you believe, all of the tests have confirmed that they did indeed come from the moon. Many of the moon rocks contain small glass spheres or spherules. Glass is produced naturally in two ways: in explosive volcanic activity and by high-speed meteorite impacts that melt and vaporize rock. And in both methods, the rock needs time to cool and crystallize slowly. On Earth, the elements quickly break down any volcanically produced glass, but in space, glass spherules survive nearly pristine. and the glass spherules inside these rocks survived pristine. So that's allegedly the proof they're saying that they came from the moon. So there you go, a couple of facts about moon rocks. Does it change anything?
There's also the point that if I'm going to say that maybe it could be moon rock, is that actually the moon's makeup is actually different to the Earth in a lot of ways. So it would be very, very difficult, or virtually probably impossible, to actually manufacture this rock. And there's also things like the magnetic resonance of the material. And there are lots of experiments over the years that have shown that it is moon rock. And it's what you do, isn't it? When you go on holiday, you bring back rock. That's what you do.
Of course you do. Absolutely, yeah. Our shells are. Some people come back with a healthy dose of crabs.
That's a damn good holiday, sir. Those are the good ones.
You're all going to love this one.
I'd be for 1998. No, I'm joking.
The footprints on the moon. People got issues with the footprints
to look
on the
into
moon.
This. Yeah, it's because of the boots.
It is, yeah.
I kept thinking to actually check this because I see the Facebook memes every so often, and yeah, there's a picture of this is a picture of the footprint, and it's got tread on it, and then this is a picture of the boots, and they don't. That's right.
It's because
correct.
He had outer boots on, and the photos that they're showing is just the inner boots, and it's that simple.
Yeah. 2 boots.
It really is.
Is that because
simple.
they weren't allowed to wear their outside shoes indoors?
Yeah, there you go.
I'm
Didn't want to bring dust into the lander.
That's it. But it's that simple. And people that can't get their heads around that,
this is as frustrating as the flag, to be honest, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest.
And also there is some people saying that these footprints have remained totally intact and haven't caved in on themselves. The lunar soil hasn't fell into within the actual area of the footprint itself, and that sort of like gets people's goat for some reason. I've heard that mentioned more than once.
Yeah,
and that's the meme I think you're referring to, Jamie.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. But isn't the material supposed to be incredibly fine? Isn't that why it would be? So it's almost like it's compacted, isn't it, when it's been pressed?
Like
but also it's not.
Powder, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not particularly compact.
There's a lot of fine powder, isn't there, on the surface, which is why it's such I suppose, a good indentation of the tread of the boot.
I would still be there today, in theory, even though it would very, very slowly fill in. Have you seen this thing with the craters? It's proof that the Earth and the Moon is actually a space station. So this is all nonsense anyway. We didn't go because it's a space station made out of metal and it's hollow, full of reptilians. But the craters, the old craters are quite shallow, but new craters are quite deep. And some people say that all of the craters are the same depth, and that proves that it's hollow. It's not true. Newer craters are deeper, and old craters are shallower. And it's literally because the old craters over millions and millions of years are slowly filling up with dust. Because every time a meteorite hits, it throws a load of material in. Because the gravity's so low, it takes a really long time for it to come down, which is why you get clouds. And so they also call them storms sometimes, and it's not. But it just takes a really long time for it to settle down again, like hundreds of years. And over millions of years, these craters are filling up. And I imagine the boots will do the same.
Yeah.
But we'll just have to wait about 1 billion years for it to do it.
There's an X-ray on the screen because NASA X-rayed them to make sure they retain their structural integrity before sending our gallant guys off. Well, not our gallant guys, but the human beings, aren't they? So we'll claim them as our own. Off to wonder and tread the wonderful ball made of cheese in the sky, guys. So there's another picture of the outer boot to stop cheese getting on your feet. I think that pretty much you can see quite clearly there. That's a substantial toe piece.
It's a pretty chunky thing. And I think the British can take a bit of credit for this because they're about a third of NASA scientists British.
Indeed, they are, yes.
So we can take a little bit of credit.
50% of them were actually British when it comes to rockets, full stop, even the Manhattan Project. And not a lot of people know that. So us Brits get forgotten about when it comes to rocket technology and space technology and all that lot. But let's not get into that. Let's not shed
punch
too
well
much
above
tears.
our weight. We punch well above our
Yeah,
weight.
there you go.
I think we
You
proved that
punch
with the
well above
development
our
of the COVID vaccine, really, didn't we? On the global stage recently.
The C word.
Don't say the C word. Shut up.
Sorry.
Okay, so a couple of points. The usual kind of thing here is apparently you can still see the different Apollo where the different Apollo missions landed, and even the footprints of the astronauts from space. Okay, on Earth, footprints of other markings on the surface are easily erased by the winds, rain, and other surface activity which happens on a planet with an atmosphere, oceans, and life. On the Moon, however, there are none of those conditions, which is why the footprints remain. Now, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has been in orbit around the Moon since 2009, has captured photographs of all of the Apollo landing sites. And these images show the Apollo spacecraft in exactly the right locations. And amazingly, you can even see the astronauts' footprints as they explored their lunar home. These landing sites have also been independently spotted by a variety of other spacecraft from China and Japan, apparently. So there you
can
go.
see
Them
the rover,
footprints
the
is
rover
there.
tracks as well.
The rover
The
tracks as well,
when they
absolutely.
were doing the drive-by. But obviously that's digitally faked since then.
Yeah,
Obviously.
conveniently, every single bit of it is faked. They're still faking things 50 years after the event to try and fool people, to try and fool the population that was scared of a political issue that's half a century old.
We've got to fake it though, because the Earth's flat and we can't actually get through the dome. So we've got to fake that the moon landings stuff. It's all just cartoons.
People?
It's all digital images.
There's a mirror on there anyway, isn't there? That they can shine a laser at.
And I am glad you've just said that, cheeky monkey, because that leads us on to this particular one. Equipment left on the moon. Yes, equipment left on the moon. Now, there's a lot of stuff left on the moon, isn't there? Some people are saying that if they landed on the moon, there's lots of stuff they couldn't be in brackets should still be there. Well, it is still there. Quite frankly, that's exactly it. It is still there. Damian, dive in, baby. What do you think?
Yeah, got a good enough telescope. I'm sure you can probably see it from.
No, you can't.
No, you can't see it with it.
Can't even see it.
Hubble can't see it.
No, but satellites though, we have lots of satellite and orbiters that can, but they're much closer. But yeah,
I can't say I've ever attempted to do it, but I imagine that you'd be able to with a decent enough telescope from the Earth. But
yeah,
no,
of course you could.
No, you can't. Promise you.
Have you tried?
Yes.
Have you really?
That sounded so convincing.
Yes.
There wasn't even a pause, was there? It was just like yes. It was an absolute, not a pause, not a thought.
What scope?
Yes.
What telescope did you use?
Lie. But I just remember seeing it on thing. But they were saying even if Hubble was pointed at it, it wouldn't have it couldn't focus in on that. When we see the images we're talking about, it's satellites that are only 30 or 40 miles above the lander. That's the images that Dave mentioned earlier. When we can actually see this stuff, we can actually see the equipment. We can see the foot treads. We can see the rover tracks.
Lots of equipment still left on the moon.
Rubbish. Wherever we go, we dump crap.
Yeah.
And that is a very good point, Jamie, because that is the human condition, isn't it? To make a mess and pretty much destroy everything he sets foot upon. And as you can see here, it's all still left on the moon. These bits are still there and can be seen. And there you go, the rover. And I also believe or read or heard that, no, you're not seeing any of these. It's pretty much satellites that are orbiting in lunar orbit that are able to pick up these bits of evidence, the footprints and the lunar modules, the lunar landing modules. Because
Didn't believe me.
Because they're just far too small in the grand scheme of things to be seen. But all this equipment that people said should be left on the moon, if we'd been to the moon, it is on the moon. That's sort of the issue with this one. It's so I've answered your own question.
Prove that was man though, or could that have just been because we sent probes first?
Yes,
and the first things that land on the moon were unmanned. So could this just be unmanned junk?
Well, yes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, of course,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely, of course it can, yeah.
Yeah, it's not evidence of the humans landing. Obviously, I suppose only the pictorial evidence that they've provided is the only evidence that we've got of humans being there, isn't it? Although you could argue all equipment could be sent without the need for a human pilot. They've done a lot of probes.
They love
Again, some of the some of the useless. Thanks for that. Some of the useless facts.
Isn't that ironic? So do aliens supposedly as well. Weird.
Yeah, they're big fans of probing.
Masses in cahoots.
The useless fact thing is, of course, that the moon landing was not just for entertainment. Okay, so even if hundreds of millions of people did watch it, it was also a huge opportunity for science. And a number of scientific instruments were sent up with the missions to learn more about the moon. And some of these were left behind, as we've just been talking about. And amongst these were retroreflectors. Lunar reflectors have enabled precise measurements of the Earth-Moon distance since 1969, and many remain operational today, and reflecting lasers off surfaces installed by Apollo 11, 14, 15 crews, as well as the Soviet Lunokhod, if that's how you pronounce it, 2 rover. Another experiment is the LSM, or the Lunar Surface Magnetometer, which was designed to measure the moon's magnetic field, and it determined that the moon does in fact have magnetized features on the surface, but that the magnetism is not the same all the way around. And the data from these experiments and others is still used today. And of course, anybody who watched Mythbusters will know about the reflectors. It's that was a fairly interesting episode. But the stuff is on the moon, people. And as the guys have said, was it due to human beings?
Some of our experiments were left there and then brought back, because that's when they said, there's life. Because we said when they brought, was it a camera or something? They brought it back, and then when they realized it was like it had bacteria on it growing. It was like, oh my God, it survived on the moon. And they actually think probably it was contaminated, possibly on during the transit, or whatever. But extremophiles can survive in conditions far worse than the moon, though. So
they've had some of that recently, haven't they? NASA, they've had they tested something came back from space, and they had bacteria growing on the outside of the spacecraft.
It was the ISS, wasn't it? Something was growing. There was an experiment on the outside of the ISS, and when they brought it back in, they found there was stuff growing on it. So, space isn't as dead as we think.
So that was unfortunate. It would have been nice to have had a baby piece of fungus from the moon.
I say we'll be having space burgers soon, won't we?
Yeah.
I was watching that Timothy, the British astronaut, Timothy. Oh, what's his surname? I forget now.
I can't remember him. Tim, mustache guy.
I'll look it up.
Quickly have a search, because nobody can remember a UK astronaut. Let's have it right. Nobody ever remembers a UK astronaut. That's the truth, people.
Anyway, I was listening to what he was saying, and he was saying that British astronaut Tim Peake. Tim Peake.
About 2 minutes ago, I think. Yeah.
But anyway, he was just saying viruses were about, they multiply about 10 times as quickly in zero gravity. So if you do get like a cold or something in space, it's just, that's it. It can be game over. You can be, ill for days.
Yeah. Apparently. Not game over, then just ill for days.
Or a game over. It could potentially be if it was something probably more than a common flu virus. I don't know. If salmonella, if you got salmonella food poisoning, then that could probably kill you a lot easier in space. Yeah.
It did come across as a little bit of finalistic when you first said it, Damian. I've got to be honest. It's game over. In space, nobody can hear you rot.
It's game over. You will have the sniffles for like 3 days.
Wrong choice of words.
You might be slightly off colour for 1 or 2 days. But I like it. Actually, I like your description better, Damian. I've got to be honest. It's game over. That's where we're at with it. Another good one is
mostly men, aren't they? Man flu.
Yeah, there you go. It's man flu in space.
Imagine man flu in space, dear God.
That's what
it'd be the end of this one, so.
We can't hear the thrusters. Now, believe me, I have wrote a massive diatribe on this with being into music and sound engineering and understanding acoustical properties. And I've had discussions about this with other people as if this is a big debunker of man making it to the moon. We can't hear the thrusters. So who wants to take this first?
Well, I've not heard this one before.
Sound kind of requires stuff to vibrate against, though, to transmit. So there's, that thing of you in space, we can't hear you scream. Well, you could if you were in a spaceship, but if you were out in space, because sound requires vibration, and vibration doesn't really travel very well in space.
Yes, correct. Sound doesn't travel in a vacuum. It needs particles in order to vibrate. Yeah, it's a pressure wave essentially, isn't it? Sound traveling through the air.
Would it?
Why can't you hear it inside the capsule, though? Because obviously the rocket is on the capsule, and you can't hear when Armstrong is talking about 30 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters, and coming down. So obviously there's particles and there's air inside the capsule, and that capsule must have been vibrating like crazy. So why can't you hear it over the recording?
That's a good question. You think there'd be some kind of internal noise from the external engine, although it is operating in the vacuum of space. So as we said, the sound's not going to. So it's only going to travel what travels through the material the craft's made of, and sound travels much better through like open doors, for example, than it does a closed door.
Yes, definitely. And isn't it a thruster rather than a rocket as well? It wasn't actually a rocket engine, was it?
Oh, on the lander.
Yeah,
sorry,
of
course,
thruster,
yeah, a thruster. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Sorry, wrong term.
I know I'm being pedantic, but there's no flames
it's
coming out the bottom. It's
you're not being pedantic. Yeah. It's a very good point, and it's right. It's absolutely needs to be said. Steve, what are your thoughts before I launch into a massive diatribe about this? What we can go, because there is a reason why we can't hear it inside.
Well, to be honest, as I said a minute ago, I'd not heard that one before, and when watching any of the sort of space footage and things like that, I've not really not noticed it, if that makes sense. I think your brain sort of automatically what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of puts it in there,
fills in the gaps.
Yeah, totally. But no, I'm going to go back and sort of relook at some of the footage on that, because that's quite interesting. But as you were saying, with like no sound traveling in space because of vibration and things like that, that makes sense as well. But yeah, interesting that.
Now, apparently, despite what many people think, sound can travel through space, and interstellar gas and dust left behind by old stars and sometimes used to create new ones does have the potential to carry sound waves. It's just that we're not able to listen to them because the particles are so spread out, and the resulting sound waves are of such low frequency that they're beyond the capabilities of human hearing.
Right, okay.
Sound travels as molecules bump into each other, the same way that ripples spread out when you drop a stone into a pond. And as the ripples get further and further away, the sound gradually loses its force, which is why we can only hear sounds generated near to us. And as a sound wave passes, it causes oscillations in the air pressure, and the time between these oscillations represents the frequency of the sound, which is measured in hertz. The distance between the oscillating peaks is the wavelength. And if the distance between the air particles is greater than this wavelength, the sound can't bridge the gap and the ripples stop. So therefore you don't hear the sound ceases. So it says, therefore, sounds have to have a wide wavelength, which would come across as a low pitch to human hearing, in order to make it from one particle to the next in certain parts of space. And once sound goes below 20 hertz anyway, they become infrasounds, and we can't hear them. So as for radio communications to astronauts, radio waves travel perfectly fine through a vacuum because they're a type of electromagnetic wave, light. And electromagnetic waves do not need a medium to travel through. Similarly, we can still see light emitted from the sun, even though a vacuum stands between the sun and the earth. So sounds can't travel in space. Now, the audio, basically, I've looked into
what
the
you're
headsets.
saying is we should have been able to hear the rocket, so therefore the moon landings were faked. So we've just wasted the last hour of our life. Is that what you're saying?
That's what you would like to think. That's what you would like to think. That's what you would.
I'll be back.
I'm out of it. That's it. Drop the mic. Walk off the stage. I'm done. That's me. I've just disproved everything over the last 50 years. Good night. But I've looked into the headsets. As boring as this sounds, I've looked into the headsets that the astronauts used and why, and the frequency response and why you don't hear it. Okay. Basically, it's a long-winded thing. I'm not going to do it all, but the command module, DSC, which is the data storage equipment, excuse me, was it would store the recordings on something called the data storage electronics assembly unit, and it made recordings on board the lunar module. But the DSA flown on the Eagle during the Apollo 11 malfunctioned, and as a result, many of its recordings are barely, if at all, audible. To emulate Mission Control Houston, the Quindar PTT, which is the push to talk button, it adds a short 2.525 Quindar tone to the start of the transmission. And then at the end of the message, the press to talk button, a switch is released, and another short tone is added to the audio. And the bandwidth is slightly reduced in this mode, okay? Right, now basically, what they were using is a dual conductor capacitor-based transistor oscillator, Jesus, called microphone, okay? I've got the specs. The module width was 14 HP, module depth 26 millimeters, including its power lead. It used 35 milliamps positive at 10 milliamps negative, blah, 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 using phase modulation. Okay. And the astronauts used a Plantronics MS-50 headset because NASA was looking for a lightweight, self-contained communication product.
Yeah.
After the Liberty Bell 7 capsule splashed down in 1961, the hatch prematurely blew out and the cabin flooded, losing all radio transmission and preventing astronaut Gus Grissom from contacting his recovery team, because it was vital that a reliable device be developed in case of emergencies like this. So NASA contacted the ITT labs in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I believe, and the ITT labs designed a self-contained radio on transceiver called a Kellerad unit, which included the MS-50 headset. And Plantronics began working on a way to implant the company's MS-50 into the MS-50 headset into an astronaut's helmet after astronaut Wally Shearer saw the headset as part of the Kellerad unit. The company created a space environmental communications division to work on the new idea, and it took only 11 days for the team and NASA to have a working microphone design. In addition to a new noise-cancelling feature, subsequent improvements were made, and the unit was used throughout the Gemini, Apollo, and Skylab missions. Now, it was an electret microphone with an amplifier, and its sensitivity, 28 dBV, 150 ohms, blah, 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 but the frequency response was 300 to 5,000 hertz, well out of the range of infrasound and subaudible frequencies. So the microphone headset isn't capable of picking up the low audible hum that would reverberate or be generated inside the capsule due to the thrusters on the ascent stage from the lunar surface. The headset just isn't capable, the transducer in the microphone isn't capable of picking up them frequencies, which would be associated with vibrational frequencies on the structure of the craft.
Can I just make a comment there? That's what I was sort of thinking. It would, with the weight. Excuse me.
Steve, you were thinking everything he just said.
Yeah, cheers,
That's
mate.
what you were thinking.
So,
Jesus.
with the like the loading weight and things like that, and not being able to take loads of stuff, obviously because of the weight, it would make sense that they would make or design a microphone system that would only record their voices, because that's all you would need to record. You know, you wouldn't want to have the noise engine or any mechanical sort of noise interference. You would just want to hear their voices. So it would make sense that you would only hear their voices and their voices only. And because you're saving on weight as well, and not having bigger sort of microphones and things like that to take in more sort of sound. So yeah, it makes sense. That.
Oh, we're talking about the voice. So isn't it amazing how calm Neil Armstrong was during the mission? Not only is he landed on the moon, not only is he on Earth anyway crashed that bedstead that they used to design and design the lander. He's crashed it once and nearly killed him. But also everything had gone wrong on the landing. They missed the landing site by 30 miles or something. And they were only about 12 seconds away from running out of fuel. So I mean, but he stays absolutely dead. His
Training.
voice doesn't. But yeah, exactly.
We all know
when we
this,
did
guys.
That's
when
why
we
he
did a
was
50th
picked.
anniversary. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. But we did a 50th anniversary video a couple of years ago, and that was one of the things you have to focus on. Is just these guys. You just gotta. They're just amazing what they did. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Absolute fact that probably isn't going to be massively. Well, if it's a fact or not, I don't know. But I heard. I'm going to say it anyway because I'm pretty sure the guys will be able to either agree with me or completely shoot it down in flames. Is the yeah, that's the one. Hide it behind the coffee. It's absolute rubbish. Is that the warning voice in fighter pilots' cockpits are usually a female because it's more calming and less likely to alarm somebody in a dangerous situation than a male voice would be.
Yeah.
There might be some psychology to that. I could see that being possible.
100%. I
From
thought
my
I heard
history
that
as a
somewhere
fighter
anyway.
pilot, when I was a fighter pilot, I can tell you that's not true.
At least when he wasn't.
Yeah, I wasn't.
My brother was too tall to be a fighter pilot. He was gutted.
I'm not
you
too
have
tall
to be a short
fighter
ass.
pilot.
I thought about
Yeah.
it for a
That's
few
why
years.
women are
but-
better. It's off topic. Women are better fighter pilots than men because they handle G-force much better than we do.
Mhm.
That's a fact for you. There you go.
They handle a lot of things better than what we do, don't they? To be honest.
Yeah, they can also. There's no such thing as multitasking. It doesn't exist. But what women can do is what we call multitasking: is go from one thing to another really quickly and really better. They do much better than men. Men like doing one thing. We like one thing. I like to focus on that.
Oh, men
women
like
can
only doing one thing. All right.
Oh yes, we do. Women have got their brains are all they're boom, 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 boom. Even when they should be thinking about one thing, they're not. So there you go. Any feelings in the comments?
It's all right. I enjoyed that. You carry on. Before we move on,
My wife might hear me.
Watch Jamie's
Thinking
head
about
and
100
whack.
different things at once.
we have some notable
Sorry,
mentions at the end of this list. But before we move on to the notable mentions, here's one, and this isn't going to come as a surprise that it's made the list. Like I say, I come up with 10. The other guys have come up with some, and we'll go into them in a sec. But this one, no stars in the photos. No stars in the photos. I can see there's this. Jay's nodding sagely, and Damian's also got the grin of smugness about it too. Damian, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can do. The no stars in the photos. Well, basically it relates to a similar sort of thing to the sound basically, and being an audible frequency that isn't picked up. It's you've got to have a camera set to take photos in different light environments, and obviously there's dramatically different environments in space, isn't there? If you're in the dark side or the light side of the moon facing the sun. I think even the astronauts said, didn't they, that when they're on the surface of the moon, they couldn't see the stars from the surface at all. Which is quite well. You wouldn't have expected that. You'd have expected it to be amazing with no atmosphere from the surface.
It's counterintuitive, but you're basically in daylight, aren't you? It's like being on Earth in daylight. They were on the moon in daylight. It's equivalent. But also the camera's aperture just wasn't right for it either, was it? They're just not. It wasn't set up to capture low light. But also, isn't there a thing about when the starlight comes through our atmosphere? That's one of the reasons why we can see the stars brighter, because you're actually seeing the light from the star hit the atmosphere.
Yeah,
correct.
So that's another reason why stars appear brighter on the Earth, is because we have an atmosphere. But it's counterintuitive, isn't it? That's one of those things. It is counterintuitive. You would expect it to be, like you said, amazing, but the light is just swamped out. It's the light being reflected from the moon, and basically you're in daylight. So it's that's why you can't see the stars.
Yeah, that's it.
Shame, because that would have been a hell of a show.
However, we're looking at an image there. Sorry, go on, Dame.
I was going to say, you thought they would have possibly taken a camera with them that was specifically designed to take a photo of the stars from the surface once the lunar module had landed. You thought they might have had one exterior camera mounted that was just set for that purpose, not to film the astronauts or all it was set to do was the stars outward, facing.
Would have been nice, wouldn't it?
They did. And that is what we're looking at on the screen now. It was a camera that was able to photograph in UV light.
They did.
I haven't seen that image before.
No, same.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So using UV photography, was it Apollo 17 and maybe Apollo 15?
There's a
Okay.
blob on the right hand side. Is that a craft?
UFO.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
Oh, no. It's an UFO, OVNI.
The aliens had landed, mate. They were watching them from the just over the hill, weren't they?
Well,
There's a
that's
photograph of Earth taken from the moon. That's Earth taken from
That's
the
a
moon
cool
with again
photo.
UV photography, and you can see stars.
Yeah, I've never seen
Yeah.
them before. That's fantastic.
So this they can't be seen is the lads have pretty much nailed it as I expected them to. All the reasons mentioned above why you're not seeing stars in the photographs taken on the moon is exactly that. It's simply down to exposure.
Yeah.
Because the light from the sun's that bright that the astronauts had to use coated visors anyway just to shield their own eyes from the glare. And if the photos had been taken with a wider aperture or a slower shutter speed, then the stars would have been seen, but you wouldn't have seen the moon and anything on it, and you wouldn't have seen the astronauts or the lander because they would have been overexposed, and all the images would have been washed out. Okay, so
Can you
interesting. Sorry, go on, sir.
Sorry, Dave. Can you zoom in on that picture? Or
I can. Where do what the Earth itself? Do you want me to zoom in on?
Yeah. That white line going across the Earth, is that where it's taken a photo because it's a long aperture and it's the Earth spinning? Is that what that is?
It's the equator, isn't
Did
it?
you say?
I think that is the equator you're looking at. Yeah.
But
The line.
that's the line on the map we're looking at. I was wondering, would that be part of the aurora?
You've got the divide. You've got the day-night divider, and then obviously you've got the what looks like to be a rough equator. Yeah, I guess is it? It's like, is it? But maybe not.
That's as far in as I can zoom.
Edge of the curl there.
Okay, I've not seen that picture before.
Yeah, it's interesting, that, isn't it?
You say Apollo 17, so or maybe 15. So it's towards the end of the program.
I believe so.
Okay.
That was a bit of shoddy research on my part. I was that excited at getting the photos, but I believe it was some of the later missions. Yeah, I nearly messed up and said Apollo 13 earlier, and that didn't even land on the moon. So
you can see the wall around the edge. Look, and I think that line's the dome, isn't it? That's amazing. It's beautiful, isn't it?
I must admit, the top looks quite flat, doesn't it? Where the
done that for all you flat earthers out there. Enjoy.
I wonder what they must make of those last two pictures, because that was all right. Say it with Apollo 17, and it was. But what that also proves is perhaps they weren't very good at getting, or the camera technology wasn't there to take the pictures of the stars at Apollo 11 when they promised they'd get there by the end of the decade, by the end of the 60s. But they developed the camera tech as they were going on the Apollo missions through to what, 72? Was it 70? It was only a few years, wasn't it?
They stopped, didn't they? 72 they stopped, I believe.
Yeah. Although, however, it does also make me wonder that no one's tried a manned mission back since for the last 49 years.
Okay, so
well,
what you're looking at there
quite
is
difficult.
the camera that the astronauts used is that Silver Hasselblad data camera, or the HDC, which is fitted with a Zeiss Biogon 60mm lens with a 70mm film magazine containing specially formulated thin-based Kodak film, which allowed for 200 images per magazine. So there you go. And the Biogon lens was f.56 wide angle with an f-stop scale of 5, 6, 8, 11, 16, 22, 32, and 45 for all you photography freaks out there, which allowed maximum depth of field with fast shutter speed, which enabled the astronauts to take clear, well-exposed photographs and still reduce glare and washout. And the luminosity of the stars in the sky was not strong enough to be exposed over the main photographic composed subject of any given image, which is pretty much what the mystery machine said, really. In it.
Yeah.
We're very
pretty much
what certainly is.
That's why we're up here, people. Was that a little bit conceited? I don't know. Was that a little bit conceited?
That's why we're here and you're there.
Go on.
No.
Okay,
was
this
the
has got to be
what's the-
said because you sent this one over, Jamie, and I'm sure we'll have to get our teeth into the meaty goodness of this one. Is America fake it if they thought Russia might beat them?
Yes. Next question. They would. They
Yeah.
would in a heartbeat. It would actually amaze me if they didn't at least consider it.
Mm.
They've been caught
was-
out doing a lot of naughty things, haven't they? You know, all the false flag operations they've been proven to be involved in. You know, yeah, I just, you know, it's definitely something they would have considered.
Yeah.
Sputnik threw the American people into a panic, a
Mhm.
blind panic. The 50s and early 60s, they were terrified of communism, hence they kept fighting wars, proxy wars against it. You know, it's the thought of Russia beating, and that's a fundamental question for me. Nobody can say they wouldn't have. If Russia was well ahead of them, their rocket technology was better than them, even after. I mean, after the shuttle disasters, and they needed to shift to rockets. They had to buy a load of Russian rockets because theirs weren't good enough.
Yeah, indeed. The technology for the thrusters of the Saturn V was sort of like begot about in a bastardized idea, hybridized idea from the Russians, because the ones that the NASA were using just weren't capable of lifting that payload.
They weren't good enough. One of the things the NASA's currently designing the new heavy lift rocket, the STS, I forgot what it's called. But they're designing the heavy lift rocket. When they decided they started this new project, the first thing they did was drag out one of the old Russian engines to figure out how it worked. So all these new young engineers. So the first thing they did was go back to 30-year-old Russian technology to figure out how to work, to give them a starting point to now build these new heavy lift rockets. The Russian rocket technology, at least, was way ahead, and that terrified the Americans. The thought that they would lose this was, particularly after JFK had said it was going to happen, we're going to do it by the end of this. You've got to remember, they said they were going to do it by the end of the decade, and they only managed it by about 6 months. They were pretty close. After JFK's assassination as well, I think the thought of them failing was beyond.
They probably didn't. Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, they didn't want to do that to the public after his assassination. It would have been a straw too far.
Yeah. And the only thing I think possibly worse than them failing or not being able to get a rocket up is getting a rocket up and those astronauts dying.
Which is why so much was put into the retrieval of the astronauts when it come to Apollo 13. I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. But you can remember two of the Apollo, or at least two of the Apollo earlier missions, was it 5 and 8? Went into the moon like a dart into the ground. They completely failed.
Smashed straight into the surface. Yeah,
and it completely failed. So I mean, I honestly think there's one of the reasons why I think it's so hard for us now to go back to the moon. Is it because, rocket technology hasn't actually come on loads in 50 years. It's still basically the same principles. But I think the main reason why it's so difficult, it's taken us so long to develop the technology to get a spaceman to the moon now, is because we don't want them to die, and there has to be a reasonable expectation of them surviving. In '69, they didn't really care. They were more than willing to take the risk.
They reckon it's about a 1 in 9 chance of dying. That's what.
That's good.
That's about 11%, isn't it? Like 11% chance of dying.
We can't have that now. They have to survive. If we go
they have to get them back, don't they? And especially more so now after the shuttle disasters. Columbia and Discovery and Challenger. They have to get them back. And I think it also needs to be said that the race was on because there was a lot of the Russians were absolutely spanking the Americans when it came to first. I mean, if you take the Manhattan Project and the use of the atomic bomb out of the equation, a massive amount of money had been put into Russia to developing arms. So you had ostensibly at the beginning Russia winning the space race, Russia winning the arms race, culminating in the Tsar bomber, until you know, of course, you had the Gemini and the Apollo space projects. So would that be enough to warrant wanting to lie about it? Well, it's not unusual for people to do propaganda. I mean, you know, propaganda's going on all the time. We know this only too well, don't we? So I would say, I would have to agree with you guys and say, absolutely, it's possible they would lie to make it. It's just within the remit to do so, isn't it? Would they fake it if they thought Russia might beat them? Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually think in 67, after Grissom accident, if they suddenly realised we can't do this, they'd have faked it, 100%. And they would have put the effort in. And to be honest, as well, it's very difficult to say it's impossible that they did fake it, because everything we've talked about tonight, there's nothing really that couldn't have been faked with enough effort, you know, with enough planning.
Where did Russia go wrong in that space race then for the Americans to?
I've forgotten the name of him, but they lost their main guy who was pushing for it. I forget his name. I don't know if you can remember it, Jamie. The main protagonist for pushing for it, and what was his name? He passed away.
I think I know it, but just before I sound like an idiot.
Political pushing, you mean?
Yeah, as well as ideology surrounding it, and they started to put even more money into the arms side of it. Who is it, Damian? Can you remember?
No, I can't. It's not who I was thinking it was.
There was one argument to say they never actually really tried to put men on the moon. They were saying that a lot of it, apparently they were putting a lot of stuff out to try to push the Americans to do it because they wanted them to spend money. And as far as the Russians were concerned, they were wasting money. They were more interested in satellite technology and a technology that in their eyes they could use. So there was some rumors to say that they never actually really tried that hard.
That's interesting. That
is interesting. Yeah.
Well, what was it? Yuri Gagarin. He was the first one in space, wasn't he? It was the early 60s, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
So they did.
Conspiracy theories about him as well.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. No, of course there are. Yeah, but he was the first man in space in 61. So they beat them. By what, 8 years in space terms, and I suppose
that's a long time.
It's a pretty big first. It's a pretty big first, Damian, isn't it? Not the first man in space, so they have to top that. I mean, it's got to be a big one to take that. So if you can't do the first man in space because the Russians have done it, you've got to put the first man on the moon, haven't you? Clearly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this was a battle of ideology. This was honestly there was a war basically for the world. The Americans were saying democracy is the way to go, and the Russians they're going no, communism's the way to go, and they were battling for people's minds. You know, it was a war of ideology, and the Americans, I mean, desperate isn't the word. There was no way they were losing this race. By hook or by crook, they were going to win this race.
Isn't it strange how all the communist countries though seem to have come round to the capitalist ideologies in the current world? China, Russia, they've all embraced capitalism because they saw how much money it was making for the few at the top, and thought, I want in on that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like, shh, don't mention that.
It's a dirty secret, actually, that the Chinese
we call it democracy.
Take that dirty underwear off the line. We don't want people to see that. Number 2, another good one, is the pod launch from the moon looks fake. So basically, the lunar module, the ascent going back up to the command module, looks like it's fake.
It looks fake as crap, to be honest. It goes. Poof, poof.
It looks flimsy at best, doesn't it? The lunar lander module when it's ascending. Yeah, it could almost be a balloon, just although it's not waving. It is relatively consistent in its trajectory, but
it looks like it's been pulled up on a crane. Is what it looks like, and there's no thrust that you can tell. I don't. Again, it's not understanding the science of it. And I'll tell you what I used to believe 20 years ago. The moon's gravity is 1/6 that of the Earth, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So surely you would need a rocket 1/6 the size of the Apollo rocket.
Yeah,
that was my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but actually, when you get into it, it's not true. You don't need anything like that. For one, there's an exponential thing, but also the rocket doesn't have to push through our atmosphere.
Yeah,
and that's a big one. So to launch an object from the moon, it doesn't require a rocket 1/6. It's a fraction the size of what's required. And the other thing is as well, the gravity is like say 1/6, but you get a distance is relative, so you get away from that gravity much quicker. So you don't need. One of the problems with our technology is you have to get the rocket traveling fast enough before the air runs out, and because obviously then the rocket doesn't work as well, it's not as efficient. So you have to get to that escape velocity really, really quickly. And the height of that, you've got so much height to do that. The moon, there isn't that issue. There's no thing. So again, the rocket, you've got far more momentum, is what I'm trying to say, from the thing. There's nothing pushing you back. So the rocket,
much more room with which to much more room to reach your so-called alleged terminal velocity too, because of a ceiling height.
That terminal velocity height is much lower as well. That's I think the point I'm trying to make. So the escape velocity speed is much lower.
Yes, the escape velocity will not be a sixth of the moon's escape velocity will not be a sixth of the Earth's escape velocity, even though there's
much lower. Yeah.
Okay, so some interesting facts on the lunar module, just because we like throwing them out there. And the specs, the weight of it empty was 8,650 pounds, or 3,920 kilograms, and its weight with the crew and propellant was 14,700 kilograms, or 32,500 pounds. It had a height of 7 meters, which is 22 foot 11 inches, and it had a width of 9.4 meters, which is 31 feet. The descent engine thrust was 44,316 neutrons on 9,870 pound of thrust maximum, or 4,710 newtons, which is only 1,050 pounds of thrust minimum.
That's actually not a lot.
That is not a lot at all.
Not a lot of thrust.
1,050
you compare that to
pounds.
jet fighters, that's a fraction of what our jet fighters are capable of doing nowadays.
The ascent engine, which is the bit which makes it looks fake when it's going back up to the command service module, is 3,500 pounds of thrust. That's all it takes?
Which when you compare that, like you said, to the Apollo rocket, that that behemoth, largest rocket ever fired, it's phenomenal, isn't it? And this is why one of the reasons why we want to go back to the moon now. Is because if we can get a base on the moon and we can start producing these things and then launch missions from the moon rather than Earth, it's much easier and much cheaper.
Yeah, of course. Join the aliens.
Any of you guys that might be interested as well? The fuel used was a 50-50 mix of unsymmetrical dimethyl hydrazine and regular hydrazine, and the oxidizer used was nitrogen tetroxide. All these bits and bats of information are out there if you want to know them, folks. So that's why it didn't take a lot of thrust to get it off the moon, as well as everything that we've discussed. Are we good? Are we that good, really? Yeah. You lot in the side chat can tell us, because I think we are.
It still looks fake.
It does look fake,
But what looks, it's back to that thing, isn't it? Of what looks fake, what doesn't look real on the Earth, doesn't necessarily mean that's what it looks like on the moon.
Exactly. You've got no comparison again, have you?
Yeah.
It's that same thing I
mentioned. That's it.
Yeah.
We've never tried it. We're not used to seeing it, are we? So that's it. And we don't know what to expect. So
I think the big one, before we go to the big one, because I think the last one should be the big one, which is why we don't go back. Let's not do that one yet. Because you've also got because you hit upon something before where you said it's that flimsy, the lunar lander, that it can be punched through with a screwdriver or something like that. I can't quote you word for word, but something along them lines. You alluded to that fact. Is the fact that it's held together with tape and black paper. It's held together like a tin can with tape and bin bags and that kind of thing. And people, they see photographs such as this beast, which I'm about to show everybody. There we go. Exhibit number oops. But there's a reason.
Crap, isn't it?
It's battered, isn't it?
There is a reason that it looks so bad, apparently. But I want your thoughts first before we go into all that.
It looks like you could just push it over and it just fall to bits. It does not look like it would take any force or any, let alone flipping zoom up into space and back down to Earth. No,
It looks like it's made out of papier-mâché.
it does,
But it
doesn't
looks
it?
like-
I mean,
it looks
the
like my
panels
kids-
are all bent
I'm
and
thinking that.
tin foil and it, yeah.
But this is a bit like the, you know, like how the Borg in Star Trek have a big cube and it's dictopher. It's because because you could have spaceships. They don't need to be pretty and aerodynamic and all these things. You can just build that. There's no air. There's no thing. It doesn't need to be. How strong does it need to be? You know, how pretty does it need to be? There's no air. There's no resistance. There's no.
Well,
So
you're planning on
that
landing
looks
on
crap.
another planet. It might have an atmosphere. There is
This
always
is
that
designed to
possibility.
this is designed to do a job that was in it. It's designed to do it
Yes.
incredibly lightly because again, there was so much that the rocket could lift, and they had a maximum weight.
Mhm.
You know, and that this thing had to come under that maximum weight.
Yeah.
So that's again the reasons why it's so flimsy, because everything is there for a purpose and everything is there to do the absolute minimum requirement. You know, so.
Well, just out of
Crazy.
interest, and you know, just for entertainment value, on a crapometer of 1 to 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, as we look at that now, it's got to be rocking about a 9.5, hasn't it? Really, it's fairly up there.
Easy.
Yeah.
Ugly, flimsy. It just that thing doesn't need a door. You just sort of rip open a bit and just step in. Surely you don't need to.
It's
My
fairly
tent's
flim-
made better than that.
To think how old it all them years ago as well. Unbelievable.
Sure, I guess I've seen more sturdy Chinese lanterns.
Yeah, exactly. Damn right.
Well, again, let's say with the facts of doom is like, obviously, as has been alluded to by the luscious delectable panel, is that they knew it would operate in a vacuum and it really didn't need to be sturdy. And as Jamie said, the shape of it didn't matter because it wouldn't have to deal with aerodynamic drag. And in fact, the descent stage was designed to buckle in the right places upon landing, and that was how it absorbed the impact. It was only going to be used once, and this was the most weight-efficient method of handling the shock of landing. And also, the complex insulation blankets covering the module had many layers, and contact points between the layers needed to be minimized so that heat wouldn't be passed through them by conduction. And the black material is between the layers is where the thin Inconel sheets form the outer layer of the insulation blanket. And they were painted matte black with Pyromark paint to improve their heat emission properties, so they would cool off really quickly, because black material both absorbs and emits heat better than material of other colours. Beneath the black layer was reflective layers to prevent the heat of the black layer penetrating into the module. This treatment was done where the exhaust of the reaction control thrusters heated in the lunar modules, and it had a tendency to crinkle. And on this particular module, that may have been accentuated by the fact it was in fact installed at the last minute, as were the chutes under the thrusters. And the foil that you're looking at is Captain MLI, which is multi-layer insulation, and the blankets, so Captain MLI blankets. And it is actually pretty complex, apparently. In the places on the lunar modules that only needed to be a heat barrier to sunlight, high reflectivity was the most effective approach. And those places are the shiny amber colour of the Captain that we're looking at on the picture there. And as there is no air in space to pass heat by convection, if you lower the absorption of heat radiation by making surfaces that are highly reflective or emissive, and there are a few contact points to pass heat by conduction, insulation can be highly effective, apparently. So with the Captain foil blankets, the contact points were reduced by hand crinkling an inner layer of the blanket. And to make for an even more effective insulation, the polyamide sheets are hand crinkled before blanket fabrication, and this crinkling provides a path for venting and minimizes contact conductance between the layers, because after all, it's just about keeping out dust. The actual module underneath all that was a little bit more sturdy than it's given credence for. As you can see in that image there.
Okay. Yeah, it's very deceiving.
It's
Yeah,
genius in
yeah.
its simplicity, though, isn't it? That's the thing, isn't it? Like they're saying, we as people, as a species, tend to overcomplicate things when we start trying to solve problems. This is the exact one. It's simple, simple, simple. Keep it simple. Have a simple solution for a problem, and it's absolutely ingenious.
I flicked over to something you didn't need to see, but I'll put it back up. That's the vomit comet in it, which is for training for zero G. Because I was going to go on about the zero G, but I don't think we need to go there. But there's the vomit comet, as it was well known. So there you go. The paper foil blanket type thing we've covered. This is the big one, guys, and then we'll take a few questions before calling it, I think. Are you ready for this? Why didn't we go back?
Money.
Public interest too low. The viewing figures dropped off from Apollo 11 to Apollo 17 to virtually nothing. No one was interested anymore.
Both wrong. Aliens. Oh, come on, guys, have a bloody laugh. Bloody hell.
Yeah. Well, no, because I was thinking, yeah, probably.
Yeah,
The reptilians told us to do one. I honestly think it's down to money. There was no financial reason to go back. Now there is, so we're going back. Within 5 years, Gateway will be in operation, which will be the satellite around over to the Mars. We'll use the moon as people saying, oh, it's a stepping stone to Mars. I think it's probably more likely going to be a stepping stone to the asteroid belt because we want to mine the crap out of it.
First
There's loads
trillionaires.
of minerals on the moon. You know,
First
money.
trillionaires will be miners. They'll be mining the asteroid belts, I reckon. Well, the first official trillionaires, because supposedly the Rothschild family is already trillionaires, aren't they? But, who knows?
But, I mean, we need exotic materials. We need materials that are finite on the Earth. Battery technology requires materials we have a very limited amount of. We need to go and get it from somewhere. And it's going to be an asteroid belt.
Yeah, of course it is.
Or Mars, or the moon, or just asteroids that are floating around. And so financially, we didn't go back because there was no reason to. Now there's a reason, and it's money.
Yeah.
Well, China have said they're doing a manned mission, haven't they, in the next 10 years?
Yeah.
Well, pardon, 8 years now, by 2029, isn't it?
Oh, did they give a cut-off point? Yeah.
Yeah, 2019 to 2029, apparently. They made, I think the announcement they made was in 2019, wasn't it, in the next 10 years? So we shall see. That'll be interesting if that occurs.
Have you seen Space Force on Netflix? With Steve Carell?
Not bad, That's not bad.
It's really good.
It is, isn't it?
I love it. I love it.
It's
the Americans
really
are crap. We're putting we've got a satellite in space, and then a massive Chinese satellite comes along and just smashes it.
Brilliant.
And then we land a tiny little pod on the moon, and then they sort of zoom out, and the Chinese have built like this huge thing with it's huge base on the moon.
It's brilliant.
It is really good, and all our rockets keep exploding. And
who's the main guy in it? I forgot his name. But
Steve Carell.
That's it. He does it
Carell.
brilliantly.
Carell. Yeah,
the one from The Office, the American Office.
Yeah,
Carell.
Yeah,
40-year-old virgin. Yeah. Definitely go watch it. After you've subscribed to our channels, then go watch that. I shouldn't advertise Netflix. Really should. They do okay on their own. Actually, then I think they don't really need us to push it. But,
I think before we go, I'll be dropping links to the relative channels anyway, showing the love, because I expect people to show the love. But I'll just go back over with that, and then we'll take a few questions from the side chat before we call it. But in summing up on that one, it's pretty much that, innit? Yeah, a changing of priorities, and like you said, there was the Vietnam War going on. Really starting to hot up by the early 70s towards the obviously 1975, and it also like the geopolitical element. We've already done it, and they got good at doing it by getting there, and then just abandoned it just as quickly. And the attention turned to the space shuttle program as well, didn't it? And that shouldn't be forgotten about. The space shuttle program was, I know when people see the results of it, the space shuttle going up, it was in its infancy during the Apollo missions and even before the space shuttle program. And obviously after the space shuttle program, you got the International Space Station. and which has pretty much been permanently inhabited since 2000, hasn't it? I think.
Yeah, I think
since
it's
the
only been
return
empty
of the
once,
Millennium.
hasn't it? That little accident, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think
And,
the effort though went towards satellites, didn't it? So that's why the shuttle was so important, because we needed that large payload, and
yeah,
like you said, the priority changed. Getting to
Yeah.
the moon wasn't really a priority. All of a sudden, we wanted spy satellites, we wanted communication satellites, we wanted. I think the priority changed, but that was all about money as well, really.
Exactly.
So-
I think. Oh, sorry.
No, go on. Yeah, right.
I was going to say, I think the GDP didn't it swelled like to over I don't know 5% of GDP was going into NASA in in the late 60s for Apollo 11. But by the time you'd probably got to Apollo 17, again the interest had dropped off from the public, and I think it had dropped down to after the last Apollo one. It's probably running at 0.5% of GDP
Something
goes to
like
NASA in
yeah.
America. So you pump 10 times the money into it than normal times, you're going to get 10 times the results.
Yeah, most
So
definitely.
basically, Apollo was prohibitively expensive, wasn't it? Really hazardous and unsustainable, really. And as we said before, once like Kennedy's challenge really had been accomplished, there wasn't any political incentive or budget to keep it going. That's sort of really the top and bottom of it. So it's not massively difficult to understand why we didn't go back, or we haven't gone back straight away. But it doesn't mean we're not going back, because as Damian says, the Chinese are looking at doing it, and of course there's these other plans in place. So
But
the
now
Orion
the
and
Chinese
the Gateway projects are the big ones. Yeah, the Gateway project will have a permanent space station over the moon, probably within 5 to 6 years, and it'll be mostly privatized. I mean, Elon Musk has done stuff at a fraction of the cost, and it really does show that big national funded organizations like this are incredibly wasteful. SpaceX has done more than what NASA, is right on NASA's heels really in rocket technology, but they've done it at a fraction of the price. It's about a 20th of the cost.
I wouldn't argue on
similar NASA projects.
I wouldn't argue on NASA's heels. I'd argue is basically in the last how long SpaceX existed for? 10 years, 20 years?
So, yeah, I think about 10 years.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you
Well,
think NASA doesn't
done
actually have
nothing.
a working rocket at the moment?
No, and it hasn't really done anything since the Apollo missions ended in '72. So SpaceX, founded in 2002, so it hasn't even quite been 20 years yet, and he's already reduced their running costs, created reusable rockets. Really, I think NASA have been resting on the laurels of the Apollo program for the last 50 years, and then Elon Musk in the last 20 has just shown them what you're playing at.
Yeah. I mean, NASA's heavy lift rocket will be significantly more powerful than the heavy lift. Is it the Falcon 5 or is that the
Bet you it comes into problems and doesn't work like Elon Musk's stuff works, though.
Well, Elon Musk has just said it's not a problem. We'll just slap 3 Falcon 5s together and then it's more powerful. So actually, it's just
you can't argue with that kind of logic, though. Really, in theory, at least.
More power.
In theory, at least.
No, just have more of them. It's not a problem.
If in doubt,
but then
get
also
more out.
he's building the space bus. He's building that the Starship program, which is going to be talking about building a space vehicle as cheaply as possible. And he says that's the way to get large numbers of people onto Mars, 1 million people within 30 years, is by being able to build 500, 600, maybe 1,000 of these things and having them launching every single day, because they cost a fraction of almost a disposable spaceship. That's why the thing looks as ugly as it does, and then looks, thing is because it's built to be disposable, and that's something NASA have never even thought of. It's just like it's incredible how far I would say we've gone as far in space travel in the last 10 years or 5 to 10 years as we have done, to be honest, since in the last 60. We stagnated for 50 years, and now we're just but it's money. It's money orientated. There's a payday.
Perhaps there a technology as well that supersedes rockets that's being kept hidden, maybe.
There isn't any need for NASA to push for anything, because he's got his own launch pad, hasn't he, in Florida? SpaceX is just go off the back of Elon Musk. They don't need to worry about that. They can endorse research.
Cape Canaveral they rent large sections of Cape Canaveral out to SpaceX.
So why even worry about it? Okay,
Well,
so
they
any
don't need to.
questions in this? Sorry, Jamie. I'm sorry. Go on, sir.
So I was just going to say they don't need to do this. It's been privatized, and it's found that it's much better. So, yep.
So, is there any questions in the side chat before I start dropping links to these wonderful guys? Any questions? Okay, so we'll highlight that one actually, if you Shire, because that has massively been misconstrued and edited to suit the narrative of the debunkers. That particular comment is, did Buzz Aldrin misunderstand the girl's question when he said no one has been to the moon, or was it a slip of the tongue to an admission of truth? Does anybody want to take this before?
I think I think it was a little bit of both, wasn't it? He sort of misunderstood the question, and he sort of said the wrong thing, and he's like 900 years old, and a bit mad, and
Well, that's a good point about the radiation. You know, they seem to live quite good full lives, don't they? A lot of the astronauts for supposedly getting toasted by the Van Allen belts. Buzz is still alive. What's he now? 80.
he's 903 years old.
I think he was. I think he was
I think
80.
he's
Was
older
he
than that.
86 a few years ago? He might be
I think
89 now.
He's going to be getting close to 90. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
He's also
He's
on recorded on TV saying about the monolith. I can't say it. The monolith on Mars as well.
91.
And, saying who put it
Yeah.
there? Who knows?
It looks man-made. He says it looks man-made. You know?
Yeah.
And these things appear all over. And he does talk about that a lot.
Mm.
You talk about Neil Armstrong as well, who was maybe he just didn't like being interviewed, but he hated being interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he did like his contractually obliged ones. He did one or two around a couple of the anniversaries. He did sort of present a TV show on Discovery Channel, but he only really did sort of like, hi, I'm Neil Armstrong, and look, watch this TV show. And he didn't really appear in it a great deal. But you know, this was a guy that was a recluse towards the end. But no, sorry, the question's on Buzz Aldrin. I think it was a little bit of everything on that. I don't think it was an admission of truth.
If you see the full question, that's not the way it goes. It's edited to look like that because the girl actually asked him a question about returning to the moon, and this statement is, if we go to the moon, and people have took that if we go to the moon as an admission of them never going to the moon, which isn't actually the case. It was edited and cut out and taken out of context to suit a particular narrative. It's out there for people to see the actual full footage when he's speaking to the girl in the classroom, but it has been edited to suit like a lot of conspiracy theories. It's not exactly what was said at all, and it was the way he delivered it. She asked if they went back to the moon, and he said, if we went to the moon, and people have took the if we went to the moon as an admission of never going there in the first place, which isn't the case.
Be careful with these clips. There's loads of little clips like this knocking around. There's one with Bill Gates talking about depopulation and stuff, and it was but it was just very cleverly edited. Always try to go to the source material and look at the whole thing. Be really careful with these clips.
Yeah, that's it.
Very much so.
And that what you make of their body language, and that the way they answered at the press meeting after they come back, something was off. There's different answers and looked at each other very sheepish.
Yeah, I do tend to agree with that. Neil Armstrong, Jamie was saying, was a bit of a recluse, and never really gave an interview. But you think, being the first man to step foot on the moon, he would have wanted to share that with people, unless there's something else, perhaps about their mission that they came across, perhaps artifacts, or perhaps some kind of evidence of an ancient civilization having built something on the surface of the moon. Maybe, I don't know, but they do seem sheepish, and they do seem like they're hiding something.
Yeah, very much so.
I would say that they're particularly Neil Armstrong in particular, that these aren't TV presenters. They weren't comfortable in this situation, and I can kind of probably understand why. I'm not sure there's a great deal in that. But you alluded to the dark patches in the, when the radio and everything went quiet for so long during the mission, the Apollo 11 mission, and they believe that maybe they were actually there was another purpose that we haven't really touched on in the video. But I think that's possibly likely that the location of the landing was picked very specifically for a reason that we don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
I also think there's a preset amount of information they're allowed to give out because he's still the first landing on the moon. In the eyes of the rest of the world, this is a massively huge level of secrecy surrounding a lot of the details that would have been involved in the landing, and there's only so many questions they're allowed to ask. We see that going on all the time. I'm thinking, if anything, you know, the more interviews they've done, the more jaded they became answering the same questions, when delivered at them with that element of doubt, questioning such a massive achievement that they've done, belittling what they've done, also mixed with the fact that they can only say so much. And like you said, Jamie, they're not TV presenters. And as I'll throw it to you, Damian, in one sec. And as Damian said, you know, is the things going on that made up a bigger part of the mission they couldn't speak about anyway? Go ahead, Damo.
No, just you made me think of that. Who was it? That guy that used to go and all the astronauts, Bart Sibrel, I think his name was. He was the one that did that documentary that I saw probably back in the 2000s. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon, and he was also used to go and accost the astronauts and just say, you know, why don't you admit it? You didn't go, and he does get quite a aggressive reaction out of most of them, to be quite honest, from going and accusing them of that. And whether that's them reacting, you know, because they, you know, how, you know, dare you after all these years, people keep coming and doing this, fed up with it, and just, yeah.
I think whatever they do in that situation, though, they'd be down for it. If they go, how dare you, and get really angry, they say, the protested too much, I feel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they just go, whatever, say, don't protest us enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they're damned if they do, damned if they don't in that situation.
Yeah.
Did Buzz Aldrin not actually punch him?
Yeah, he did. He punched a
He
guy.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it
Pretty
was
sure
the same
Buzz
guy.
Aldrin punched him.
Yeah.
It might be that guy.
Yeah.
I would agree with. Is that Hyde? There were really, NASA isn't supposed to have military links. It's actually illegal for NASA to have military links. It's supposed to be a civilian organization, but particularly the Apollo mission, and they do still even today have really strong military links. This space plane that keeps going up and nobody knows why it's going up was built by NASA, but it's operated by the Air Force. The rockets that were then redeployed and became the Titan rocket, which is the really big interballistic nuclear missile system that the Americans used for the next 30 years, was the same rocket basically as the Apollo 11, as the Apollo rocket. So I mean, there were very strong military links, and I think probably for good reason. This again was the biggest, most important thing probably the country was doing in the late 60s. And all the technology they developed was then fed straight into the military, because that's what the Americans always do. Everything goes straight into the military.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's fair enough. I mean, is this okay? I'll highlight that one actually, Shy. We sort of alluded to the fact that it could have possibly been faked anyway, just to like do the old na at the Russians. But adding to that is that and the later attempts were the ones that were successful. Now, I've thought about this a lot in the past when I had my "it was faked" session. You know, when as you said before, Jamie, there was a time when you thought it might have been completely plausible that it was faked or hoaxed, and all the people have said that and then changed their mind. And I've also been through that. I've thought no, it was real, and then there was a period in my life where I doubted it. You know, and now I'm back to thinking it did occur. But that actually had occurred to me too. So what are your thoughts on that, guys? That the first one was actually faked, but the later attempts were the ones that were successful.
Well, Damian, this is what you believe.
Well, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of. I just don't believe. Not a big believer in coincidence, and when the chronology of things, you know, and you promise to get there by the end of the decade, you know, and then you only just make it. You know, it all adds up to more to the conspiracy, perhaps having some roots of truth in it. I think so. I do tend to agree that It would be the most likely of them to be faked, wouldn't it? If they couldn't get there for some reason in '69, something went wrong, and they only went into low Earth orbit, for example, and didn't go through the Van Allen radiation belts, and then fake some footage of supposedly being a bit closer to the moon than they actually were. Yeah, by using camera and the and the effects by looking at the moon through the window, but from the other backside of the shuttle. That's what that documentary, that funny thing, happened on the way to the moon. Supposedly
occluded glass, didn't they, and things.
It showed you, and it did seem to look like Neil Armstrong in that footage. So it does make you wonder.
Yeah, I agree. Agree on that.
One of the big things for me is as well is if one of the arguments that I saw was just saying that this couldn't be faked is because 100,000 people, either directly or indirectly, worked on the project. So say, were they all in on it? I go, no, of course not. And they wouldn't need to be. You'd need a handful of people to be on this if they did fake it. You'd need to build the rocket anyway, and you're building the rocket because you want to build it into continental nuclear missile. So you're still building the Titan. So you're still building the rocket, and you'd still have to have a launch system to get them up into space, obviously, because if you can't fake that. So to try and sell a lie, you still have to put them in space. They talked. I've seen engineers in interviews over the years saying that it ran exactly like the simulations because they ran simulation after simulation of in Houston control. They could have just been, on their little computer monitors reading. They're just looking at a telly basically. They could have been watching a simulation for all they knew. With the radio signals could have been bounced off the moon, so it looked like the signal was coming from the moon when actually maybe it wasn't. All these things are not likely, but they are possible. And I just think that this could have really been handled. And NASA is so compartmentalized, sort of thing, that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. It was
indeed,
so
I mean, it's
secret.
even people will use the anagram of NASA as never a straight answer. True.
Yes.
I mean, and you made a good point, saying it could have been bounced off the moon, which means that it seems like it's coming from the moon, but that doesn't prove that the signal was filmed or recorded on the moon. So you've also got that element, so a TV signal bounced off the moon, people picking it up, the signal coming back reflected off the moon. I suppose the ultimate question would be, it would cost a great deal of money to go to that sort of expense to do that. Even faking it, hoaxing it would be a massive expense. Would it not just be cheaper and quicker and easier just to actually send somebody there, given the fact that it didn't matter if they died or not, because the same value on human life wasn't? I mean, we've just got to look at Grissom, White, and Chaffee, that they died in the Apollo 1 on the gantry. Would it not just be easiest to do it rather than fake it if it's all down to cost, given that the two of them might be comparable?
I think the big question there is though that it's a risk. They'd have been balancing the risk, and I don't think they'd have cared about the astronauts. I don't mean the risk on that. I mean the risk of failure and the political fallout of failure. And I think for the Apollo 11 mission in particular, if they thought they'd fail, or like they said, or they just, if NASA in 67 said, we can do it in 72, we can't do it in 69, we just can't. I honestly think the high ups would have gone, fake it then. Go in 72, we'll still go, but fake Apollo 11. And then we'll go in Apollo 12, and that'll be interesting, people will still watch it. And then Apollo 13 will nearly fail, and that'll be exciting, people will love that. That'll get public opinion on our side. And it's like a movie. It's like the third act, the disaster in the third act in a movie. I do honestly believe, I honestly, hand on my heart, think we went to the moon. But I also, hand on my heart, know for a fact that if they either thought they couldn't or actually couldn't, that they would fake it completely in a heartbeat. They would.
I also think they went to the moon. Sorry, Damian, I'll pass it over in a sec. I also think they went to the moon. And I also think that if they couldn't get to the moon, they would make people believe they'd been to the moon without any hesitant. or any hesitation whatsoever, or any deviation from a plan. But I truly think they did.
Yeah,
I think Apollo 11 landed on the moon, and I think that it was that day. It was a great moment in history. I think they did make it. I think the sheer brilliance and magnitude of it is a testament to what mankind can do. And I think because it's so big in its magnitude, it can be difficult for people to believe it because there are so many things that seem improbable. But man overcomes adversity all the time. In exploration, in technology, we overcome it all the time. And admittedly, there are things that cause questions. And we haven't asked all them questions tonight. We all know that there's lots more questions that can be put forward that surround Apollo 11. But that being said, I believe they went. Damien?
Yeah, but very much swinging in. I wouldn't like to say anything with 100% certainty. I'd probably give it 95.5 to maybe not even 5. There is just a couple of things that niggle at me a little bit that just make me wonder. But generally, my consensus is that they did land on the moon.
Yeah.
On Apollo 11 in '69.
And how amazing are these guys as well? You know, you got these 3 guys stood on basically, or sat on top of the world's largest firecracker that's designed to, explode in a controlled way. You're going through the Van Allen belts that we don't really understand. We're going to land on the moon, hopefully, without any computer, the computer technology. My calculator's got more computer technology than that thing had, more computing power. You're doing it blind in so many ways. And these guys not only did it, they fought over who was going to do it first. They were in competition with it. They were all dying to do it first. These guys were, hero is the word.
Yeah.
We need another word for them. They're just phenomenal people and you're right, Dave, that it's amazing what the human race can do when we put our minds to something. A lot of the time,
human ingenuity.
Yeah, a lot of the time, unfortunately, it's greed that gets us to do these things, which is sad. But when we have to do something, or we really, really want to do something, I mean, we can literally move mountains. It's phenomenal what we can do as a species when we want to. Wish we did it a bit more. The really incredible stuff a bit more.
No, I liked that. That was great. Steve, what do you think, buddy?
Exactly the same as everyone else, mate. Again, 95% certain that they did go, but there's just that niggly little bit, as everyone else has been saying, with the little bits that sort of pop up and stuff like that make you think, well, did they fake it? But yeah, I believe they did go. They did land. Yeah, definitely.
More circumstantial, isn't it? The faking it than it is necessarily having hard evidence for it being fake. I guess.
Yeah.
But small percentage.
It's possible.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. It is possible. I can totally see why they would, but no, this is one of man's greatest achievements, and
yeah.
and when these guys do deserve all the credit, because it's not brave. Again, it's like it needs a different word for it.
It is.
It's and the skill of Neil Armstrong. Like I said, he was running out of fuel. They missed the target. They were doing it landing by hand on a surface. They didn't 100% know what the surface was going to be like. They were flying towards an area that they were told, do not land there. And they were going towards it really quickly because it was so rough. And they're saying, and it didn't even sound like he broke a sweat.
Yeah.
Phenomenal people. Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's a great testimony. That actually, in the side chat there, I've just dropped the link to Brief History of Mystery. You'll find some absolutely delicious content there, by the way, people. So if you're not already subscribed, please click that link and subscribe to Brief History of Mystery with Jay and Damian there. So please do that. Click it. I'll drop Steve's in a second. And I think it has to be said as well that Michael Collins, who didn't land on the moon but stayed on board the command module, passed away today.
Really?
He
Oh my
passed away
God.
today.
I
Age
hadn't heard that, to
91.
be honest.
No.
And we had already arranged to do this, obviously, before the passing of Michael Collins.
Yeah.
So in a way, I'm glad that we sort of agree that they were brave men, and that it was a massive achievement for mankind.
Yeah.
That we all should be proud of. And even if we don't understand all the ins and outs and all the intricate little details that surround it, it doesn't mean it didn't happen just because we don't understand it. We don't have all the answers. We haven't been given all the answers one way or the other. So, you know, we can only go off what we know or what we've managed to research and find out. I think what everybody said tonight has been a good eulogy. Not that we're in a position to give that or be judgmental about that, but I think with us all being in agreement that we think they were great men, that we can't say anything more fitting to Michael or even Neil or Buzz. So rest in peace, Michael. The link that I'm just dropping now is to Steve Stranger Times.
Cheers, buddy.
So please subscribe. Next week, Steve, are we all congregating on your channel? Are we polluting your airwaves?
Yeah, hopefully, mate. Yeah. If I can get the flipping cameras to work, it's just doing my head in. Internet's shoddy, flipping everything.
Do you know what we're talking about yet? You got an idea?
You what? Sorry.
Do you know what we're talking about yet? Have you got an idea?
Oh, I've got I've got something lurking in the background, but I'm not going to say just yet. But
in other words, he doesn't know.
Yeah. No, probably something on ancient aliens.
Oh, great, cool.
Like the ancient alien question, something like that.
Okay.
Possibly.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Look forward to it.
Yeah, should be good, man. Should be good.
Yeah, I'll do like the topic.
Yeah, you might have to tell us quite quickly though, mate, because that's we need to research, and that's luckily that's such a small topic.
It don't, it don't have to be centered on one subject of it, does it? It can be an open.
Perhaps that's just as well. That's just as well, Steve. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't people go on the Facebook page and tell Steve what to do? Tell Steve what we're going to talk about. Go on the Facebook page that we've set up, and I want to say Mean Machine then. Mean Machine. What a great movie that was with Burt Reynolds.
Oh yeah.
I go on the Facebook page Mystery Machine and give us some ideas then what you'd like us to talk about as well.
Yeah, so please do exactly what Jamie's just said. The Facebook page there, the Mystery Machine, aka the Bean Machine. So that look up the Mystery Machine on Facebook and drop some ideas. And culmination of ideas is always a good idea, as cheesy as that sounds. And thanks, Jamie, as well, and Damian for it's pretty much the inception of the history of mystery, a brief history of mystery. So we sort of like jumping on the funk that these guys are rocking. So I appreciate that, and I'll say it publicly. Give you the credence you deserve for that, guys. And so does Steve, even though we haven't given him the chance to say it himself. But he said be good. So please tune in to Steve at Stranger Times next Wednesday, and then the following week will be Jamie and Damian's term at Brief History of Mystery. Thank you to everybody who's joined in. Big thanks to everybody, much appreciated. Thank you for the donations. I've been trying to keep it going and on track. So if I've missed any comments, that's because I've just been doing what I do, and not because I've been ignoring you, because you're all very important. We appreciate you all being here. So from me, I want to say thank you, and I'll pass it over to the guys.
Cheers, guys. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Thanks for viewing the comments.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us, guys, and thanks for having us on.
See you in a week.
Yep. See you next.
See you.
Not quite the right day, was it? See you next Wednesday.
You nearly made it, then, mate.
Wednesday. Right, guys.
So well.
It's good enough.
So
okay, you take it easy. Thank you for watching us, and be safe. Be good.
See ya.